Mr. Dettelbach, are you troubled by the rule? I mean, you told him one thing 10 years ago, and now you're directly contradicting that.
The stabilizing brace short barrel rifle rule, I assume, is the rule you're referring to.
I'm referring to the letter that was sent back on November 26, 2012 that Mr. Nell's referenced in his first line of questioning, where
Sure.
you told the FTB finds that the submitted brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert the weapon and would not alter its classification. Now you're doing just the opposite.
We have been public and in the rulemaking itself have detailed that history, and there were inconsistencies. However, there was also a situation, Mr. Chairman, where people were marketing products that had never been presented to ATF, saying that they were ATF approved.
Was that the only time you told them, the only time you told the American people that it was okay?
No, we look at specific
Let me read this
products.
letter, March 5th, 2014, because this doesn't so much focus on the brace, focus on how the weapon's used. And we have determined that firing a pistol from the shoulder would not cause the pistol to be reclassified as a short-barreled rifle. We did not classify weapons based on how individuals use the weapon. So you told them not once, but twice that it was okay. And I'm just asking, does it bother you now that you're making the change that's going to impact millions of Americans?
The rule was necessary in part because it needed to address inconsistency so that people could understand the definition of a short barrel rifle.
I just read two letters that were consistent. Both of them said it was fine.
There were other letters that were not.
Have you ever found, has the ATF ever found itself in this position where a rule change directly contradicts what you've told American citizens was okay, and that's going to impact millions of law-abiding citizens? Have you ever found yourself in that situation?
Respectfully, I don't believe that's I agree
millions
with that summary of where we are.
Millions of Americans aren't going to be impacted?
No, there were specific products that get presented for classification. Those products then sometimes change. They're not the same ones that are marketed. And there was inconsistency. The market is dynamic. It was necessary to do what notice and comment rulemaking, I think, is a better way to do that.
I think millions of Americans think the inconsistency is with the ATF because you told them one thing and now you're changing. What happens on May 31st?
According to the rule.
No, what happens on May 31st?
According to the rule, people have, from the date the rule was published until that date, to do one of several things. They can either detach the brace from the firearm and keep both, and they can attach that brace to another one.
They got to remove or destroy the brace, get a longer barrel, turn in or destroy the firearm, or register the firearm. Is that right? They got to do one of those four things.
They have to apply to register. Whether or not the application is ruled on, they're allowed to keep the item during that entire time so that they're not held accountable for any waiting period.
If they don't do that and the timeline runs out, what happens to those individuals? They don't do those four things and the timeline is expired. What happens then?
I assume that people who are aware.
No, I'm not asking. What happens if they don't do those four things?
I think that, Mr. Chairman, as a prosecutor, I just want to be accurate. What happens, former prosecutor, what happens is, depending on the circumstance, if a person is unaware, right, they're not going to be prosecuted for things that they're unaware of.
Let's cut to the chase. They could be a felon, right?
Well,
they could be a felon.
It depends on the facts and circumstances of each case. And of course, we would prioritize enforcement on gang members who are having these items and shooting people.
You mentioned enforcement. How are you going to enforce this? You're going to go to gun ranges?
What we will do is
you're going to go to manufacturers and look at the risk of people they sold braces to?
What we will do is when we do a search warrant in a drug case and we discover an unlawful item, whether it's a machine gun or a Glock switch or a short-barreled rifle that doesn't comply, we will consider that as one of the charges. There's no plan.
Does the Gun Control Act or the National Firearms Act clearly and unambiguously prohibit pistol braces?
It doesn't prohibit anything. It calls for increased controls on short-barreled rifles.
Not the gun control, but I'm just reading from the court decision yesterday in the Sixth Circuit where the judge said the statute does not clearly and unambiguously prohibit bump stocks. The court went on to say for a decade the ATF has maintained that a bump stock is not a machine gun part, and the court said the ATF's own flip-flop on this position is one of the reasons why they ruled in favor of those opposing the rule you guys made. Seems to me we're in the same situation here. And yesterday, the Sixth Circuit gave us a strong ruling on the bump stock issue. I would anticipate that we're going to get other strong rulings on this issue as well. Thank the gentleman. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. You know what Americans can't stand? You know what they can't stand about this town? The so-called experts. The unelected experts who try to run our lives. Never put their name on a ballot, never have to go talk to the American people, get elected, never have to run for office. Best example, of course, is Dr. Fauci, who ran our lives for 2 years and was wrong about just about everything he said. Told us it didn't start in a lab, it wasn't our tax dollars, wasn't gain-of-function research. He said there was no natural immunity, even though it always had been for every other virus. Said the vaccinated couldn't get it, said the vaccinated couldn't transmit it. And now it's the ATF. Except with the ATF, they don't even claim to be experts. The director said so last week. Last week in a hearing in front of Congress in the Appropriations Committee, he was asked about firearms. He said, I'm not an expert in firearms. Not an expert, but still trying to run Americans' lives. You would think the head of the agency tasked with regulating the entire firearms industry, a constitutionally protected industry, would know something about firearms. Earlier this year, the ATF issued a rule that unilaterally puts new restrictions on Second Amendment rights. This rule redefined firearms with stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles so that they could be controlled under the Gun Control Act of 1968, the National Firearms Act of 1934. There are approximately 40 million firearms with stabilizing braces currently in circulation. The pistol brace was created for use by disabled persons, including disabled veterans. These individuals could lose the ability to use these tools and as a result may not be able to operate their firearm. Under the new rule, these firearm owners will be required to obtain special registration, surrender or destroy their brace by the compliance date, or they will face severe criminal penalties. This is not the result of a decision made by Congress. Congress didn't change the law. No bill was introduced in this committee, passed by this committee, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and signed by the President. Nope. This rule turns law-abiding gun owners into felons is a result of unelected bureaucrats simply enacting a new regulation. And that's not how it's supposed to work in our great country. Congress writes the laws and the executive branch enforces them. Here, the executive branch has taken power from Congress in deciding what the law should be, and that they charge themselves with enforcing. Director Dettelbach has in essence become a one-man Congress. Notably, this decision runs counter to the ATF decision under President Obama in 2012 that a firearm equipped with a stabilizing brace was, quote, would not be subject to the National Firearms Act and those controls. An independent analysis of financial harm to the firearms industry from the pistol brace ban has been estimated to exceed $1 billion. Law-abiding firearm owners relied on this ruling for a decade before having the rug pulled out from under them this year by Director Dettelbach's ATF. And it's not just with the stabilizing brace rule that the ATF is attacking the Second Amendment. They've also targeted firearms businesses by creating pretenses to shut them down. The new classifications are left purposely broad and allow the ATF to revoke the licenses of FFLs for simple technical and non-material paperwork violations. In 2022, ATF revoked over 90 licenses, more than any year since 2006. This is an attack on the Second Amendment, pure and simple, plain and simple. And I want to thank Director Dettelbach for appearing before us today, and we look forward to hearing from him and his taking our questions. With that, I would yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.